You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com. All right, and welcome one and all to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. I am your host, Mike Riley. Welcome to the show. I'm, of course, joined by my lovely, lovely co-host, Cam Robson, my girl, Charlie Sandy, Brooke Doherty, who is our executive producer, and we also have a very special guest on the show tonight, Mr. Steve Cron. We'll be talking, Mr. Steve Cron. I said your name wrong. I apologize. You will find I do that on this show a lot. It is Thursday, November the 10th, 2016, and we are 3 days out from the 2016 presidential election. And we will be talking about what happened and what the results were and all the aftermath of everything. I know a lot of people are anxious to hear what's going on. So we're definitely going to get into that. I definitely want to shout out my new subscribers real quick. Please remember to remember to follow us on the Facebook, Twitters, and everything like that by going to MikeRileyNow.com. I want to jump into this first section real quick. We have a very special guest on the show tonight, Mr. Steve Cron. Steve Cron is a Santa Monica-based criminal defense lawyer and professor of trial practice at Pepperdine Law School. Welcome to the show, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Mike.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I find it really interesting that you're a criminal defense attorney in so many words. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, awesome. And make you talk right into your mic here. Sorry about that. Yeah. Right. Now, I kind of want to. It's kind of interesting that you're here in a sense because one of the big topics we're going to kind of touch on in this show today is what is the world or what's our country going to kind of be like under a Trump presidency based upon a lot of the things he kind of campaigned on. And one of the big things he campaigned on was his stance on the justice system, right? I don't know if you've ever heard of the president of the Philippines. His name is Rodrigo Duterte. Have you ever heard of him?
I sure have.
Yeah. Rodrigo Duterte he calls himself the Trump of the Philippines for all of you who aren't really familiar with him. I mean, this man is probably as ruthless as it gets when it comes to what he would call criminal justice. He claims that he doesn't give a damn about human rights. He has killed somewhat up to 3,000 people, execution style. Most of them drug users, people who have problems with drugs. He's very ruthless on crime and is locking people up. And he called Barack Obama, I think he said something to the extent of he's a shitbag or something like that. Hold on, let me see if I can find the direct quote here. The president of the Philippines said Barack Obama. Oh, he said to go to hell. He told Barack Obama to go to hell. So yeah, but he loves Trump. And he is praising the fact that Trump is now president. And a lot of it has to do with his style on criminal justice reform. Now, according to Vox.com, Donald Trump he's running on this 1980s kind of style of tough on crime, right? So he's advocating mandatory minimum sentences for drug offenders. He's talking about stop and frisk under his new policy. Steve, what do you think is going to be the outcome of the criminal justice system based on a Trump presidency if he's actually talking about promising doing what he actually campaigned on?
Well, personally, I find it horrifying. He's talked about having Rudy Giuliani as his attorney general, and throughout the campaign, he has, in my mind, shown himself to be as much of a crackpot as our president-elect. I have trouble saying those words, but and so there's the people that they appealed to in this election were people that wanted law and order. They want to blame immigrants, minorities for all of their problems. And an easy solution is to say, just lock them up. And that's what we've been doing for, 30, 40 years. And with the Obama administration, President Obama has come to the realization that just locking up people for minor crimes is not a way to solve problems. It's just a way to incarcerate a lot of poor and minority people. And I fear that under Trump, things are going to go back to that status. And police are going to have free reign, and they're going to be taking people away and deporting Mexicans, Muslims, all kinds of stuff. I hope I'm wrong, but it doesn't look promising to me.
Right. Yeah, that is a little daunting to hear that. Recently, the federal government said that it wanted to get out of the business of of privatization of prison from a federal level.
Right.
I don't know if that's something that Trump wants to continue to embark on under his administration, but be that as it may, that was going to be a big part of the criminal justice reform system, was to decrease our prison population based upon, taking down the privatization of prisons, because obviously private prisons, people need bodies in order to make a profit.
Right. And, the Obama administration is starting to adopt to the position that we don't need to put people away in order to make the community safe, that if there's ways of supervising them in the community, allowing them to stay with their families, support their families, yet be monitored, that's far superior to locking people up for 10, 20 years over drug charges. And this whole idea of privatization is saying that we'll give the prison inmates over to private companies and pay them for the inmates. So, of course, there's going to be an incentive to keep them there. There's going to be less early release. It's going to be a profit-based system where private companies and corporations are going to be making money by keeping people in prison for longer and longer periods of time. It may sound like a good capitalistic scheme, and Mr. Trump is certainly in favor of capitalism, but it doesn't seem like a very just way to treat our citizens.
Absolutely. Another thing that was big in the campaign for Donald Trump was him and Rudy Giuliani, were implementing this idea of bringing back stop and frisk. Now, I don't know how they're going to implement that on a federal level, but, stop and frisk was found unconstitutional in New York because it targeted minorities. Now, I know you practice law out here in California, but do you think that and I'm trying to find the silver lining here, and I'm trying to see if there's anything.
You got to look really hard.
Right.
You got to keep looking really, really hard to find a silver lining here. If you're looking, if you're somebody who wants to lock people up, man, you hit the payday. But if you're looking for justice and treating people as individuals and looking for fairness in the system, it's really hard to find a silver lining here.
What's your experience with the criminal justice system? I mean, being a criminal defense attorney, I mean, what kind of changes would you like to see implemented? And do you think these changes are something? I mean, in other words, if particular changes that you wanted implemented, did you see those coming into fruition more under a Clinton presidency, or do you see them ever coming to fruition under a Trump presidency?
Well, Clinton takes us back. You're talking about Hillary, not Bill Clinton.
I'm talking about Hillary. Yes,
okay,
I understand the crime bill and
under Bill Clinton,
right.
And I think he said he regrets it, that he increased the penalties for drugs and started this war on crime.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, the only saving grace I see with Trump is that over his career, he's changed his opinions on things. He goes with the wind.
Yeah, he's a former Democrat.
Yeah, this is a guy who at one point was in favor of a woman's right to choose. Now he's staunchly opposed to it. He has changed his views depending on the wind. And this time it was a popular sentiment or at least he perceived the popular sentiment was to be conservative. He certainly was not going to get the Democratic nomination. He went after the Republican nomination when this kind of right-wing, bigoted, us against them, white against black, white against everybody else kind of notion. And the idea of stop and frisk is basically a way for police to stop anybody that they think might be suspicious. And those are unfortunately code words for racial minorities. to stop them and frisk them and give them a lot of grief over what are you doing here and what's that in your pocket and that kind of stuff. And New York, they outlawed it. Now, most federal law enforcement agencies don't do stop and frisk kind of things because you're talking about the FBI, the DEA, Secret Service and stuff like that. They do investigations of cases. They go on for a while. They do wiretaps and search warrants. They don't do street crimes. They don't, follow people around on the street and say, hey, what do you got in your pocket? They're looking for the drug dealers, not the drug users.
Right.
So
right.
I don't know that his idea of stop and frisk is going to change a whole lot, but here's how it will matter with the Supreme Court.
Yes. Now, that's a huge disappointment.
That's a scary
That's
part.
A scary part of it, yeah.
Because he's said he's going to appoint the most conservative justices in the world, and right now it's split at 4-4 because the Republicans stalled on the replacement for Scalia for almost a year. Yeah. And so he's going to appoint people that are going to say, yeah, you can stop and frisk, and if the United States Supreme Court says it's okay to stop and frisk, then cities like New York and Los Angeles and the states all over the country are going to be able to say, wow, we didn't violate their
Fourth Amendment rights.
So that's okay.
But isn't that a violation of my Fourth Amendment? If I'm walking down the street and I get stopped and frisked because I'm being profiled.
Yes, I agree. It's a total violation of your Fourth Amendment rights. But it's not going to be a violation of your Fourth Amendment rights if the United States Supreme Court says that's not a violation of your Fourth Amendment rights, that it is okay to stop and frisk as long as you have some kind of a suspicion, and they're going to start expanding what that suspicion can be. And they're not going to come right out and say, well, if you're black, you can stop and frisk them. But they're going to have all kinds of code words about in a high crime area there have been people with that description who have committed crimes in that area lately. So we thought he might be one of the bank robbers, might be one of the drug dealers or whatever. So they're going to start, the way it'll work is people get convicted. They'll challenge their Fourth Amendment proceedings, and then the United States Supreme Court will say, "Oh no, that's okay. That he had a strong suspicion. That was reasonable. That doesn't violate the Fourth Amendment." And cops around the country they'll learn, and they'll start saying, "Oh, we can get away with this, and now we can get away with this," and they'll keep pushing it. And if we get an extremely conservative Supreme Court, they'll just open the doors for cops to violate Fourth Amendment rights.
Yeah, it's a little wow.
And it's not, I hate to be a Debbie Downer here, but
no, I think everybody's kind of in that mood right now, so please don't feel alone.
Yeah, but I don't. But it's not just Fourth Amendment. It's going to apply to everything. It's going to apply to Miranda rights and people being interrogated and questioned without attorneys. It's going to apply to your right to have a jury trial, and will they start limiting it, saying you can only have a jury trial for felonies, and can you only, there's going to be all kinds of those constitutional rights because it's not even necessarily Trump, it's the people that he is going to be appointing to positions like that. And they're looking at this, they're saying on the day one, they're going to start doing these things and they're going to not let up.
Yeah. Now,
how's that for a fun way to spend it?
Other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln?
Yeah, no, things are terrific. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a little something. I don't want to say it's a harbinger of things to come. It does kind of reflect on the decision that was made by the American people. Is this what kind of America we want to live in? Where we don't do anything about mass incarceration, where there isn't any type of criminal justice reform, where we want to be, what does it mean to be tougher on crime in a Trump world? Is it like Reagan tough on crime? Is it like George H.W. Bush tough on crime, where we're starting this new era of mass incarceration based off of mostly what I would consider things to be nonviolent? I mean, do you find that to be normal? I mean, is it mostly drugs? Because, Trump's big on the heroin and opioid epidemic.
Well, look, I'm not one that's in favor of heroin or cocaine or anything like that. But, what we've done for the last 30 years or so is we've taken people who, were...
Sorry about this. See, we're coming up next to a break right here. Could you stay for a second?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. We'll be right back, everybody. It's the Mike Riley Now podcast, Young Angels of America Network. You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com. All right, y'all, and welcome back to the Mike Riley Now podcast here on the Young Angels of America Network. I am Mike Riley, of course. I'm joined by my special guest, Mr. Steve Cron. Steve Cron is a criminal justice attorney, and he also teaches at Pepperdine. What do you teach at Pepperdine University one more time?
I teach trial practice in the law school.
Oh, awesome. That's awesome, yeah. We definitely need more lawyers like yourself and more people practicing law like yourself. So
we do, especially
yes.
Coming up now, the ACLU and lots of Anti-Defamation League.
Right.
They need lots of legal help because there are going to be a lot of challenges to a lot of the Trump mandates and proposals they have.
Right. So we'll see how that whole thing works out. Now, we left off talking about the heroin and opioid epidemic here, and this is something that Donald Trump was really going hard on as far as being tough on crime. And we were talking about how, this kind of attack, kind of like the president of the Philippines kind of looks at these people who have this problem with drug abuse as criminals, and to kind of take them and just kind of mass incarcerate them, or even in the case of Duarte, to kill them. I don't know if that's going to really lead to a more prosperous society, so to speak.
Well, I think you have to distinguish between drug users and drug sellers and manufacturers. Drug users, I don't think should be going to prison. Drug sellers and manufacturers, I think they should. But I think the sentences that have been handed out in the last 30 years have been just off the charts. I mean, I've represented people that sold some drugs to an undercover agent and got sentenced to 30 years in prison.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
30 years isn't like what it used to be. 30 years in federal court means you've got to do a minimum of 85%. That's if you behave well and you get credit for good time and credits and all that. So you're talking about some guy who's in his early 20s, sells some drugs to a cop, and he's going to be in custody for another 25 or more years. That's crazy. It makes no sense. These are not necessarily violent people. Now, if they're violent, they're using guns and they're hurting people, okay, I don't have any sympathy for them. But if there's somebody that's just selling drugs to make some money, to lock them up for that long a period of time is ridiculous. And, the Obama administration seems to be taking more of an approach of, let's get them some help. Let's rehabilitate them. Yeah, they'll get some time in prison, but let's not spend their whole life there, because by the time they get out, they don't know anything other than prison life, and then they're useless. Yeah, absolutely.
And that kind of brings me to one more point. We often talk about this on this show about the war on drugs. Mm-hmm. I kind of look at it like the Prohibition era of the 1920s.
Right.
Where, if you have an illegal substance, you're going to create a black market no matter what. And if there's a black market that's created, a black market doesn't work like an open market here. If something happens, you don't take somebody to court and sue them. You got to kill them. And drugs, we are the biggest, buyers of drugs in the entire world is the United States of America. And the war on drugs only creates and exacerbates the crime element, because, it creates a black market for that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the few bright sides of this election is that here in California, we passed a law that makes marijuana legal.
Yes.
And I think that's an enlightened view.
Yeah.
Because you take it out of the hands of the drug dealers. You can go to a store. You have to be 21 and older. You have to, you go into a store and you can pick out what the kind you want, and you have someone there who's telling you what kind of marijuana it is, what the effects may be.
Exactly.
You're not buying it from a guy on the street who you don't know what you're getting.
Right.
And besides that, you're taxing it, so the money is going to the state, hopefully for education and other things.
Exactly.
Instead of having it all, back in the shadows. So, there are some bright sides of this election. But the war on drugs has been an abysmal failure, And legalizing marijuana is at least one step in the right direction. I don't think you should legalize cocaine or heroin, but I think we have to look at the big picture rather than the simple answer which Trump seems to have, which is lock them up, just like he talked about Hillary Clinton, lock her up too. I mean, that's his answer to a lot of things. Not very nuanced, not very sophisticated in looking at alternatives.
Right, absolutely. Well, Steve, I really want to thank you for joining us tonight. Steve Cron. Steve, is there a place people can check you out? Do you have like a website, Twitter, or any place people can follow you?
Steve Cron, C-R-O-N. Law firm is Cron, Israels, and Stark in Santa Monica.
Awesome. So, Steve, definitely want to thank you once again for joining us and giving us your insight. And for all of you out there, please check Steve out. Steve, thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Glad to be here, Mike.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
All right, y'all. We're going to jump into the news segment of the show. We're going to try to pop off a few while we still got a little bit of time before we talk about the what's going on in this election. The first thing I want to talk about real quick is the 4 more states legalized pot during this election. During the news segment of our show, I try to stay away from as much of the drama as I possibly can. But voters in 5 states on Tuesday, November 8th, considered whether the recreational use of marijuana should be legal. And now there are 9 states in total that are taking care of this. So that's pretty interesting. And this is according to NOLA.com, NOLA.com. Now it's Arizona, I think, was the only one that didn't vote for it. But now recreational marijuana is legal in California, Maine, Massachusetts, and a couple other places. So that's pretty interesting. As Charlie and Cam come up here and join me, what do y'all think about that? And we were just talking about this. I just kind of want to piggyback off this a little bit. How it's, now that the marijuana is legal in all these states, it kind of eliminates that black market element, right? So it could effectively drop crime. It can raise revenue. I personally think if you're going to invest in anything, you should definitely invest in the cannabis industry because it's going to be a booming market. What do y'all think about that? One good thing that came out of this election.
Yeah, I agree. I think the one main concern about this, more than anything, if you have to have one, is just it's going to be quite similar to people driving drunk. Now people can drive high, and that's something that is the only thing that really concerns me in this. I'm thrilled for the sense that it will potentially drop crime and create a strange but booming industry. But I think that there should be some work on developing something similar to a breathalyzer for pot intake, and just so that we can, just like we did with alcohol, have a sensible limit and a limit for driving and whatnot, so that people can remain safe.
Right. Now
that this is legal.
Right. I definitely agree with that. I've grown up around a lot of people, around a lot of potheads, and I've been one myself. I've been known to be one myself from time to time. So I understand the whole kind of concept about, it's not, don't operate heavy machinery, be safe about it, and do it in a place where, it's, and keep it in a legal sense. So I completely agree with you on that. And hopefully this will kind of, this will spill over into the federal level. So that way, and this can actually lead to people understanding that the war on drugs itself is more or less just failing. It's kind of putting us into a dire position, which is one of the reasons why I feel there is so much crime. So I think that's pretty interesting. And our next story here, we only have time really for one more. I really wanted to talk about how China is now pushing something called the Asian Pacific Trade Deal because of the victory in the Trump presidency. As we all know, Trump is railing really hard against what's called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is supposed to be this huge trade deal, which is supposed to open up all these borders and allow all this free trade across the pretty much across the Pacific Rim and pretty much across the world. And now that Trump doesn't want that to happen, it's going to pretty much put a damper on China. And we're not going to get time to get into much economics today, so we'll talk about this a little bit. But because of that, and because the TPP may not go through under a Trump presidency, China is now pushing for what's called the Asian Pacific Trade Deal. And this is according to Reuters.com, and I'll post the link online. China will seek support for Beijing-led Asian Pacific Free Trade Area at a regional summit in Peru later this month. Chinese officials said on Thursday after Donald Trump's U.S. election win dashed hopes for a U.S.-led free trade pact. Now, a lot of people don't know much about trade. I know it's one of those things that people overlook. It's not talked about. It was talked about a lot in this election. I mean, it was something Bernie Sanders ran on. It was something that Donald Trump ran on both. It was something that they both ran on. And it really took them really, really, really far. And do you ladies know much about the trade deals and about free trade and things like that?
A vague amount.
A vague amount. Well, essentially, what takes place is we have these things called tariffs. And tariffs are pretty much import taxes. And what these trade deals does is it kind of lowers the tariffs, so it doesn't cost anything to import anything into the United States. So therefore, they can, a lot of companies can set up shop overseas and start importing their goods here for very cheap. And therefore, it just makes more money because it takes jobs right from here. Donald Trump kind of went against that. But we'll see what happens. All right, y'all. We'll be right back. It's the Mike Riley Now podcast.
You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com.
All right, y'all, and welcome back to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Please make sure that you subscribe on iTunes. Leave us a review. Tell us how we're doing. Definitely log on to MikeRileyNow.com. Follow us on the Facebook, Twitters, Instagrams, all that cool stuff. We are back now. I'm your host, Mike Riley, Cam Robson, and we got my girl Charlie Sandy in the place to be. All right, y'all. We are gonna let's get into this election now. So now that we're in the election portion of the show, so that happened on Tuesday. Now I can tell you from my own personal account, I was just as shocked and awed as everybody else. I could not believe that Hillary lost. I can't believe Trump's our president. I'll be honest with you. I'm definitely gone through my 5 stages.
Cameron refuses to call him that.
I don't want to acknowledge it.
I know it's kind of a tough thing, but let's talk about this for a minute. First thing I want to talk about was what happened. Right? What happened? What went wrong? Where did the monkey wrench come in? There's so many people thought Hillary had this one in the bag, and all this other stuff. Charlie, we were talking a little earlier off air about people wanted change, right?
Yeah.
People wanted something different.
They basically, one of Trump's largest campaign schemes was that he was not Obama.
He was not part of the establishment.
He was not part of the establishment. And if you voted for Hillary, you would get 4 more years of Obama and possibly 8. And it was all these people that have despised, God knows why, have despised Obama's presidency and have been stuck in what they would consider an economic depression, then maybe don't have a job. They were looking for change and they didn't care where it came from.
Yeah.
And it happened to come from Trump.
I agree. I think that a lot of this normally happens in U.S. elections, right? There's usually a big trade-off between like Democrats, Republicans. It always switches back and forth. And it always seems like, people are always looking for this outsider. Remember back in 2008 when Barack Obama ran, nobody really knew who he was. He was still pretty much a guy that kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, he was a junior senator and all, but he didn't have his meat in his teeth or his teeth in the meat of politics at that point. Same thing happened when I wouldn't say George W. Bush, but same thing happened pretty much with Donald Trump, who splashed on the scene, right? I mean, he was just relatively, he's not an unknown guy, but he's unknown in the face of part of politics. He's not one of them, essentially. He's not part of that establishment. So since he's not one of them, we want this guy, and that's what people voted for. Now, in the aftermath of this, I see so much kind of going on that I'm still trying to put my finger on, right? The first thing that's going on, the first thing I really saw a lot of was what I call the blame game. Everybody's pointing fingers now. Like, whose fault is this that this shit happened? Now, for the first group that everybody seems to be blaming right now is the media. Everybody's blaming the media. Oh, it's the media's fault. The media didn't want to cover anything relevant to this campaign. They stuck on the issues. Are they stuck on the pretty much the drama. None of the issues. And therefore people got misinformed.
Well, it's also what kept Trump in the race, is that he was in the media the entire time and pushed all of the other people out, and so everybody heard what he was saying. It was just like...
Now, I don't know if I'm the kind of person that wants to just lay blame on this towards the media. Because we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago when we had our show on the media. The media doesn't have an obligation to inform you about any goddamn thing. It's not there to supply you with anything that it's that you can't go out and really get on your own. I live in the same America everybody else lives in. I was informed on the issues.
As was I, because I wanted to be informed on the issues.
Right.
And I trust going out and finding it myself, rather than having it handed to me on a silver platter. There's something that's so tantalizingly wrong about that.
Right. And I just don't get this whole notion that, oh my God, let's blame the media. It's the media's fault. The media didn't do anything. The media does what the media does. They're TV.
They
TV
weren't voting.
They're there to entertain. It's like watching WWF. AMC doesn't have an obligation to show me classic movies. So I don't really know. And then there's a lot of people who are blaming the DNC. They're saying, well, it's the fault. If we would have just picked Bernie or Donna Brazile. And it's really fucked up right now because there's not a lot of leadership in the Democratic Party right now. The Democratic Party pretty much is falling by the wayside. What we all thought was going to happen to the Republican Party. Yeah.
Which was happening, and now it's just like
now it's
completely
suddenly
switched.
Unified.
Yeah. Donna Brazile is the interim kind of leader right now, but she's going to have to step down based upon the revelations that she was giving Hillary Clinton questions during the debates, prior to the debates, which I don't think is that big of a deal, but whatever. I guess that's a big rule breaker.
Trump wouldn't want them anyway.
All right. And then there's another thing that's happening in the aftermath of these protests that are going on. Mm-hmm. Right. You got thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the street. Now, first of all, this is making us liberals look bad because it's pointing out all the hypocrisy that, at least that this is fuel for the right. Right? They're saying you people swore up and down that you were giving Trump a bunch of crap about not accepting the outcome of the election. And what are you doing? Are you accepting the outcome of the election? Now, I know Hillary won the popular vote, and we'll get into that in a minute, versus the Electoral College vote. We'll get to that in a second, but still. And on top of that, there are a lot of people who are saying, well, the left was screaming all this stuff about women, Trump disrespects women, and 52% of white women voted for Donald Trump.
That kind of scares me.
Yeah, as someone who fits into that category, that thought does genuinely terrify me for what women think of themselves and what society is telling them to do, possibly.
Well, I mean, I really don't know. It's a noodle scratcher for me too. But I will say that, just to kind of get back into the protesting out there on the streets, what is the protesting going to translate into is my question. Now, a lot of people on the right are saying, well, we didn't protest when Barack Obama won in 2008. We weren't out there on the streets. Yeah, they did. They just did it differently.
Yeah.
They did. They got organized, and they took their government back. It was called the Tea Party movement. In 2010, they organized. They dressed up in a bunch of colonial garb, and they protested. Not only did they protest, but they ran for office. That's where Ted Cruz comes from. That's where Marco Rubio comes from. That's where Michelle Bachmann's crazy ass comes from. That's where they all come from. They came from that Tea Party movement. They did what we should be doing. Getting involved, penetrating the system. Not only that, but there was the caucus shrimp conspiracy that a lot of people don't really know about. Kevin McCarthy and Eric Cantor and all these people met during Barack Obama's administration. And that's when they agreed to obstruct him 100%. Anything that he passed down through Congress, they were going to make sure to obstruct, to vote against, to make sure he was a one-term president and make sure he had no legacy. Which didn't work. I mean, the obstruction did, but not the one-term president thing. Got involved.
And not to generalize an entire people, because I know this is an overgeneralization, but Democrats right now and people who are left-wing are having protests about this. And with the way that Trump was acting about not accepting the nomination and telling people to take up their Second Amendment rights,
Right.
we wouldn't be having protests if Hillary won. We would be having bloody riots in the streets. We would be having people with guns in their hands having anything but peaceful protests.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot, and you may be right about that, even though that's hypothetically speaking.
Yes, absolutely.
And despite that fact, it's still or despite that hypothetical, the fact still remains. In my personal opinion, this isn't the way to change anything.
No.
If you really want to change our government, the only way to do it is to get involved. Which brings me to my next point, which was voting. A lot of those people out there at the anti-Trump protests, a lot of them didn't vote for Hillary Clinton.
It's ridiculous.
A lot of them didn't vote for, which doesn't make a damn bit of sense.
If you didn't vote, if you didn't try and change something, you don't have a single right to complain about anything because you didn't try to do anything or change your government.
And I swear, and that's what they're saying. Oh, 52% of women voted for Donald Trump. The Latino vote, he got a big portion of the Latino vote. More blacks voted for Trump than for Mitt Romney in 2012. But guess who didn't vote? Liberals, progressives. A lot of the Bernie Sanders supporters who just couldn't vote for Hillary Clinton for all the for God.
Because they kept saying it was Bernie or bust.
Or whatever the case may be.
Or they
Bernie or Johnson.
Or they were trying to write in Bernie's name on the ballot, which doesn't make sense because it wouldn't bring him back no matter what
And this
he
is
wanted.
Exactly. And Bernie Sanders told you to support Hillary Clinton. But that's neither here nor there. But voting was not where it was supposed to be. The whole argument of popular vote versus the electoral college vote. Now, the reason why, I understand the electoral college is anachronistic. It really is. And it probably should go away. But in a little bit of, I think it makes a little bit of sense in the fact that, in the way it was set up. Because Hillary won the popular vote, but she won most of the popular vote right here in California. There's 40 million people in California. That's more than like all the other states combined down there. There's a lot of people that live here. So California can't really decide the fate for the rest of the country, which is why we have an electoral college. And, I know this started because of slavery and the whole 3/5 compromise and all that other crap, which we don't really have a lot of time to get into. But, James Madison and all these other people were the ones who implemented the electoral college. But at the same time, Hillary didn't win the popular vote by that much, just like Al Gore didn't win it by that much. Barack Obama won the popular vote by like 10 million votes.
Hands down.
So there's no denying it. People did not show up the way they did for Barack Obama in this election. Liberals, we got what we deserved. And the American people have spoken. And Donald Trump's going to be our president. Now, what's it going to be like living under a Donald Trump America? I'll take you a little bit down history lane here for a second. After Calvin Coolidge was president, and this was in the mid-1920s, there was Warren G. Harding, and there was Calvin Coolidge. Warren G. Harding died in office, and then there was Calvin Coolidge, and there was Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover kind of won the same way Donald Trump did. Herbert Hoover was this businessman, not really fond in government, but he understood business. He was one of these baron types, right? And he won his presidency. I forget which year it is exactly. He won it, and when he did, he won the majority Senate and House for the Republican Party, which is, since Herbert Hoover, this has not happened since, and now it's happened again with Donald Trump. When Herbert Hoover got into office, I want to say it was about 6 months to a year later, the stock market crashed, and then the Great Depression happened. Why? Well, if the Republicans get their way, like people like Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and the rest of them, if they're able to privatize Social Security and voucherize Medicare and cut taxes on rich people, eliminate Obamacare, eliminate labor protections, open our borders further to multinational corporations, they're going to sink us right into a depression. And Donald Trump campaigned on all of those things. And usually when that happens, you know, if you follow your history well enough, you'll know usually when that happens, it's usually followed by something kind of big like a war. You know, 80 years ago was World War II. 80 years before that was the Civil War. And 80 years before that was the Revolutionary War. And these usually are all come about because of some huge economic turmoil. I mean, yeah, they have their other causes, you know, taxation without representation, slavery, all those cool things, but not World War II, really, right?
We're overdue for one.
Man, we're definitely overdue for one. And I'm not trying to scare you, because Donald Trump may, you know, he may come through. Who knows? Donald Trump used to be a Democrat for the longest time.
Maybe he's a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Perhaps. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to... He's innocent until proven guilty in my book. Maybe the president, Donald Trump, won't be like the presidential candidate, Donald Trump. I don't know. He met with Obama today and shook his hand and did all that cool stuff. And I know Barack Obama would have slapped the hell out of him. It looked like...
Only thing we can hope for.
Right. I'm not big on suggesting books. Well, yes, I am.
Take it back.
I always do that. I always say I'm not big on Halloween. Then every year I get all dressed up. But there's a book I would suggest. It's called The Crash of 2016. It's written by Tom Hartman. And you can get the audiobook if you're not big on reading. And it really kind of breaks down, I think, what a Trump presidency is probably going to be like. He also talks about how, you know, and the way he might fix it if we go into a depression is by doing what FDR did and start investing in government programs. In other words, start adopting democratic policies in order to make things happen, in order to fix our economy. All right, y'all. Well, that is our show. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the Mike Riley Now podcast. God bless you, Charlie. God bless you, Cam. God bless you, Brooke. I want to thank Steve Cron so much for joining us. And yeah, y'all stay up, stay strong. We're going to get through this. It's not the end of the world. America prospers. But always remember that democracy is not a spectator sport. You have to get involved. We're all in this together. There's no way in hell it's going to work without that. All right, y'all. God bless you. See you next week.
Good night and good luck, America.
Word.
You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com.